Welcome to Your Idaho, brought to you by the Gem State Patriot. My name is Bob Neugebauer. My guest for today is former Senator and gubernatorial candidate Russ Fulcher. Thank you for taking the time to come here today, Russ, and visit with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Bob. Good to see you.
It's always nice to see you.
We
don't get to spend enough time together. You're always too busy.
I know. We've got to work on that.
I wanted to start this morning's conversation off with a topic that's really been hot here in Idaho, and it has to do with the resettling of 2,000 Syrian refugees here. I know you've been talking about this up in eastern Idaho on a radio show. I understand Idaho has been picked to resettle as many as 2,000 refugees, although they're trying to keep the numbers lower.
Right.
But this will be in the Twin Falls, Boise area. Is there anything we can do, and what's the inherent risk of accepting these refugees because they've not been cleared by their own government?
Right. And Bob, here's maybe just a premise for that whole thing, Bob. The America, of course, has been a haven for refugees since its inception. And the difference now is that potentially those that are coming to our country they don't want to assimilate. Years ago, when people came to America, they made a big push. They wanted to be Americans. They wanted to join American culture. They wanted to be part of our system and come for a better lifestyle. What we're seeing now is an immigration policy and immigrants who they want to change our nation. They want to make it like where they came from. They want to maintain or grow their own culture. That's probably my biggest fear with potentially some of these new immigrants being placed in.
Well, we call it an immigration policy. I call it an infiltration policy, because Obama's talking about bringing in 30,000 Syrian Islamists to resettle here over the next year or two. And I don't think that's going to be of any benefit to anybody in this country.
There are some things we can do.
Okay.
And you're right. We talked about this in eastern Idaho just last week, and it's a big topic there. But first thing is we made English the official language of the state of Idaho here a few years ago. That was one of the bills that I sponsored. But it needs to go a step further. That English language, that legislation needs to be made such that the government documents just get printed in English. That'll be an encouragement so that immigrants will learn the language, and that's something that we want to part of meld in with our culture here. Another thing we can do is we can do some background checks. I think you pointed out that some of these folks potentially coming, they're not cleared by their own government, and we need to know who they are. I think that's just wise policy overall. The other thing we need to do, and this can be done legislatively as well, is when we have immigrant students in our schools, there's a tendency to create a parallel curriculum to accommodate.
Right.
Let's not do that. Let's maintain the curriculum that we have, not do anything special there. At the same time, there's you don't want to just make a blanket statement. These are people too, and there's potentially some good folks, but at the same time, I think precautions are necessary. We got enough turmoil on a worldwide stage, especially coming from that part of the world. We need to take some precautions. Isn't
that going to put some pressure on our educational systems and our infrastructure here, bringing that many people into the Boise, Twin Falls area?
No question about it. And you probably have seen how some of the folks in Southern California have reacted to this big flow, and Arizona have flown. They've reacted to that big flow of immigration, and we just need to be wise about it. And I'm not sure that our federal government is being all that wise.
Well, I don't think they're being wise, because we're going to wind up paying for this through our taxes anyway. They're going to subsidize these people for over a year. Now, that includes all of the benefits that you would get if you were on welfare, and then some on top of it for their resettlement. And I don't think anybody actually knows what we're paying for this.
Yeah, there's a cost, and that cost is undefined, but it's going to fall on the back of the taxpayer that's on the rolls right now. I thought of one other thing, Bob, that is important that needs to be done here. There's a piece of legislation out there that is American law for American courts.
Right.
And this arguably should have been run a few years ago. And when I was in the Senate, I actually saw this bill, and there wasn't the urgency. But what we've seen in other states is in particular when the Islam population comes in, they will congregate, not surprisingly, and in some cases they will start adhering to just their internal legal system and ignoring the one that's there in the state or wherever they're at. That can't happen here. We need to, if someone's going to live in America, they need to operate by American laws, and that should be something that we etch into our statute.
Have you talked with Senator Crapo or Rich or either of our representatives, our congressmen, about this and what they're going to try and do about it?
Bob, I have not, and that's probably something that I should be doing, and that, you know, clearly that's really falls in their camp on being the federal delegation, and so it's a good point. I have not done that.
But I haven't heard anything from our governor. I haven't heard anything from our Speaker of the House. You know, we heard a lot about the 58,000, not refugees, but illegal aliens we have here. We talk about them all the time, but I don't hear an awful lot of banter about these Syrians. And the other question I have is, why aren't we looking to bring the persecuted Christians in here rather than the Islamics? I don't quite understand that, and why we're allowing the Islamists to come in when we know that these have been problem childs for years. We know we've got ISIS groups here. You know, how do you control it? And how do you keep an eye, a close watch? It's bad enough with what we have with 58,000 illegal aliens. We don't know which ones used to be Mohammed that are now Emmanuel.
Well, and that can happen. I was watching, or I was reading some information about the immigration path for a lot of the folks who come in through the Middle East. Oftentimes they'll go through Mexico, where you can relatively easily purchase a legitimate passport.
Right.
And that's transpiring. But to your point, we have a situation which arguably, I won't know to say it's the first in my lifetime, but it's certainly at a level of urgency that it never has been in my lifetime, where you have a stated organization that is committed to a stated committed purpose and mission of eliminating the United States and Christianity, and which is the foundational religion of our nation. And in certain parts of the world, they're succeeding at it. And so it is only wise and responsible, and there's an obligation for our leadership to take some steps. I'm not trying to just slam the door so that there's no pathway whatsoever, because undoubtedly there's some good people who are legitimately trying to get out for the right reasons. Okay, but let's take some precautions because we could be importing our enemy.
Well, I do believe that they're going to wind up having some enemy within that group of 30,000. You're going to find a few rotten apples in every group that big. The troubling part of all this is Obama's administration's total disregard for Christians seeking asylum. We've got Christians seeking asylum, but there doesn't seem to be an open path for them to come here. And by the same token, aren't we a sovereign state? Do we not get to decide who gets to settle here and who doesn't?
That's a very interesting question, and frankly, that was the next point I was going to bring up. One thing that I have not heard about is who is determining what the number of immigrants is? Who's determining the location of where those immigrants go? What has been the role of the state? What has been the role of state leadership? I don't know the answers to those questions. However, to your point, there is an obligation, I believe, and a responsibility of our own state leadership and the right to be a factor in making those decisions.
Well, I would think so, but again, the only ones I seem to hear from are Mayor Beater, who has said, welcome, come on in. The door is open. And when you go back and think about Idaho itself, it was settled many years ago by a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. I'm not against allowing people to come into the United States, but we are carrying this to the nth degree. we're taking it to a point where we're not going to be able to afford to take care of ourselves and everybody else who wants to come in here, because everybody wants to come here. But everybody that comes here says they're not bringing their baggage. And the big sign on their baggage says, we're coming to change it.
Well, and of course, the large picture of the impact of immigration policy goes into many other areas. I mean, what is the cost to the existing taxpayer on the education system? What is the cost to the existing taxpayer on the transportation system, on the medical system? People want to come to America in some cases because, yes, it is a land of opportunity, and you can control your destiny to a degree. But there are also those who are coming here because it's a land of benevolence, and the programs that we have set up in undue fashion provide care and at the expense of other folks, and it just needs to be changed.
Well, there's a big sign hanging outside of America, whether anybody realizes it. Come here for all the freebies. You don't have to work. You don't have to do anything. You just sign up with the government program, and there you have it, free and clear.
You know, there's a state senator in California that I've gotten to know over the years, and from the Los Angeles area, and he's been in office for some time, and we were having a conversation here not long ago, and he was talking about how the political landscape has changed due to immigration policy, and how the state of California simply doesn't have the appetite to do reforms because they don't have the numbers anymore. In that state, the influence of that immigration policy has crippled the ability for them to go in and do significant reforms. And that can happen in Idaho just as easily as it did in California.
Well, this is one of the reasons the liberal progressives are winning this battle, because we continue to allow them to basically change our country from the ground up. Whether it's immigrations from Mexico or immigrations from Vietnam or wherever it might be, now it's Syria. The only way you stop this is to have a real solid immigration policy with limits. And put that sign out, turn that neon sign out that says it's free, and make them think you don't want to come to a place if you can't resettle and have money to resettle, have a place to bring your family to, have the schools open to you. If we change some of the policies that the liberal progressives have put in place, we might actually be able to stop them from coming in, or make it not that nice a place to go to, because you have to work.
Yeah. So why is it that that the issue with America is always dealing with the influx, not the outflow? I mean, there's a reason for that.
Well, 3,200 expatriates in 2013. They're not leaving in droves, but for every 3,200 to go out, 32,000 come in.
Yeah, and let's not forget, with an $18+ trillion debt.
Right.
We fiscally can't afford it, the policies to continue. We culturally can't afford those policies to continue. And just, you know, I'm not a huge, well, let me back up. Ann Coulter is kind of a controversial figure from time to time, but I caught an interview, or at least a portion of one, that she had on this topic here just within the last few days, and apparently she's written a book about this. But she points out the fact that, similar to what you did, that with this influx, in particular the Middle Eastern cultures, in many ways, those are flawed cultures, and they're coming in and they're influencing ours, and in particular some of the abuses on women and minorities. And so anyway, big topic, and we need to be addressing it at the state level as well as the federal level.
Well, I think we have to address it at a state level. I don't see anybody really doing that. I'd love to see somebody come out and say something. But everybody wants to become elected again. So they worry about the minority vote. They're worried about the immigrants vote. You know, pretty soon we'll be issuing everybody driver's licenses. You realize if this amnesty goes through, 23,000 of those 58,000 illegals in Idaho are
Yeah.
going to be able to get driver's license, get their green cards. I mean, he's going to make them American citizens.
And let's not forget the underlying purpose of a lot of this is they'll also be able to vote.
That's the key point. That's the key point.
And so when that transpires, once again, that changes the landscape, and it creates an unhealthy addiction for those who are depending on government as a provider instead of what you and I realize government is really a consumer.
Well, we'll have to see what happens, Russ. Thank you very much for coming here today, and we'll have you back shortly.
My pleasure. Look forward to it, Bob.